In response to your last answer, could you explain any reasons as to why athletes become aggressive?
There are many factors in terms of sport as to why players may become aggressive. For example, players can become aggressive in sport due to certain situations such as being on the losing team, pressure to win, copying other players, the nature of the game, having a bad game, and many other reasons. This would be evident in sport as an example, such as if a footballer was on a losing team that if a footballer was on a team that was losing by a considerable amount, the other team was wasting time, this could cause this particular player to act in an aggressive way, as seen in the Middlesbrough game earlier discussed. These aggressive behaviours are commonly seen in most sports and can be due to many of the reasons above, as well as many more not discussed. In some sports, this particular type of behaviour appears to be in the nature of sport, for example, football and rugby. This therefore makes it more likely in these particular sports for players to trigger aggression both on and off the field, stated by Tebenham et al. In 1977, as well as McAlvey and Stout in 2002.
Are there any theories and reasons we know of as to why people may become aggressive and what may cause this?
Yes, there are indeed four main theories when discussing what can cause people to become aggressive and where they may get this aggression from. These four theories consist of instinct theory, social learning theory, frustration and aggression hypothesis, and aggressive cue hypothesis. Firstly, instinct theory. This theory was initially developed by Freud in 1920 and later developed further by Lorenz in 1966. This theory states to believe that innate or genetic drives or instincts to be sexual and aggressive, such as animalistic and survival. This means that there is a trait of aggressiveness within everyone, as this is a genetic drive that our bodies possess, as well as having things such as sexual drive. This particular theory displays a psychodynamic approach, which believes that a trait of violence lays within everyone's identity, and is what is known as a death instinct. Therefore, this theory believes that aggression is a trait that is possessed by everyone, and is needed in things such as being used in a death instinct as in order to defend yourself. Furthermore, this theory also believes that in terms of sport, that athletes' inevitability to become aggressive builds up over time before eventually being expressed. For example, this would be evident in sport if a footballer was being persistently fouled and taunted by another player on the opposing team throughout a game, then eventually lashed out at the player in the form of a deliberate or bad tackle or push. This would show an example of this particular theory, as they have had this aggression building for most of the game before it eventually must be released and expressed. This theory states that there are two paths in which this built-up aggression can go down, determining how a person will act. These separate and opposing paths are known as displacement and sublimation. Firstly, sublimation is the release of this aggression in a more civilized way. This consists of displaying and releasing this aggression in a socially acceptable way. On the other hand, displacement is showing this aggression in a socially unacceptable way, such as attacking someone. This theory overall is the belief that aggression is a trait and factor within everyone, and this builds up over time and needs to be released. However, there are many different ways in which we release this. In addition to this, in 1999, Bushman et al. Determined a theory known as catharsis theory, which also urges that aggression is a natural and innovative motion which has the compelling needs to release through physical action within a controlled environment. Similarly to the thought expressed through this instinct theory. However, some criticisms of this theory consist of aggressive sports players often don't show the same aggressive characteristics in society from their sport. This therefore would contrast the beliefs of instinct theory, as this theory believes that this aggressive trait is consistent and therefore cannot be changed and adapted in different situations, like playing sport, which we know this is not entirely correct. In addition, another criticism of this theory is that aggressive behaviour is often learned and is linked to culture and not just innate. This also contrasts the beliefs of this theory, as this theory believes that this is a genetic trait everyone possesses, when we are also aware that this is not the case. The next theory I'm going to discuss is known as social learning theory. This particular theory is the belief, as suggested by Bundra in 1966, that all our behaviour is learned and nurtured through environment and is not all genetics, which opposes this instinct theory. Social learning theory believes that we will see significant others, such as parents or our favourite sports performers, and mirror this behaviour we see them use. This means that if we from a young age see an aggressive behaviour as normal, which as a normal way in which to act, that we will repeat these actions and therefore also display these similar behaviours, as this aggressive behaviour would have been reinforced. This theory believes that we act in a certain way entirely due to the influence of others, and therefore, if we see in terms of sports aggressive behaviours from players and performers we idolise go unpunished and without a sanction, we will therefore repeat these actions ourselves, as we have not seen a negative connotation to connect with this act. Moreover, if a young child was watching their favourite rugby player who had just committed an aggressive act on the pitch, however they did not get cautioned for this, the child would believe that this is a correct and acceptable way to act. However, if this child sees a player receive a caution for this particular act, this would cause them to not develop this particular type of behaviour, as they will now have a negative association with it. An example of this could be a footballer receiving a red card for an aggressive act. In addition, Conroy et al. In 2001 found that athletes participating in non-contact sports did not perceive acts of aggression to be tolerable in the way that individuals who participated in contact sports did. This shows that the nature of the environment you grow up in can affect your levels of aggression, as people who have grown up around these contact sports appear more aggressive than those who did not. On the other hand, some criticisms of this theory may be that people do not always copy what they see. This would mean that this theory would not be completely correct, as this is the belief that we copy actions and things we see from significant others. However, people may choose to not copy an action they see if this has a negative reaction. This is known as free will. In addition, another theory in terms of aggression is known as frustration-aggression hypothesis. This particular theory was developed by Dollard et al. In 1939 and is the belief that every time a player becomes frustrated, this will always lead to aggression. If this aggressive act is performed due to the build-up of frustration is successful, then this frustration will be released. This is known as cathartic release. However, in contrast to this, if the aggressive act fails and results in a punishment, this will only generate more frustration, adding to the problem. This, in terms of sport, could be apparent when a footballer has become frustrated and commits a bad and aggressive challenge that the ref does not see. This would therefore release this aggression and frustration and allow cathartic release to take place, as this aggressive act would have been met with no punishment, and this was not seen. However, this could also be clear in a netball player. In netball, if a player lets out this built-up frustration and aggression in the form of a bad foul and then is punished for doing this, this would only create more frustration and aggression. This theory links into interactionist approaches, as the environment has been triggered as the environment has triggered the aggressive personality trait. This means that this aggression build-up has been caused by a situation that has occurred in the environment due to something blocking a person from achieving a motivated goal, such as being fouled in football. This theory overall believes that firstly, a person in sport will have a motivational drive to achieve a goal. This goal is then blocked. This causes a build-up of frustration, which then leads to aggression. This aggression, as discussed earlier, can either be released in a successful way, ending in catharsis, or in an unsuccessful way, ending in a punishment and therefore more frustration. However, some criticisms of this theory include there is little support due to the incidence that frustration will always lead to aggression. As well as this theory does not account for the use of coping strategies some people may use when feeling frustrated. Finally, the last theory to do with causes of aggression in sport is known as aggression cue hypothesis. This theory was developed by Berkowitz in 1969 and built upon this frustration-aggression hypothesis. This theory believes that frustration does not completely have to lead on to aggressive behaviour, and instead proposed that this frustration creates a readiness for aggression. This means that unlike in the frustration-aggression hypothesis, this frustration does not always have to result in aggression, and instead just creates a readiness and awareness for the body to become aggressive. This theory also believes that aggression only occurs when an individual is in this state of readiness, that this frustration develops and is triggered by an environmental cue, like a stimulus. This, in the context of sport, would be apparent if, say, a footballer was to become frustrated. This would put them in the state of readiness to become aggressive. Then someone fouled them, which while they were through on goal. This would be the stimulus that could cause an aggressive reaction, which could range from a number of things in terms of sport. This therefore shows how this theory differs from the last, as this needs an environmental cue in order to spark this aggressive behaviour, and will require frustration in order to allow the body to be ready to perform aggressively. Also, this frustration will also cause an increase in levels of arousal. Overall, this theory shows us that an environmental cue, such as a bad tackle in sport, will lead to increased arousal and frustration, which then will, with the absence of aggressive cues, will decrease the chances of aggression. However, with the presence of these aggressive cues, this will increase the chances of aggression. These are the four main theories when discussing aggression in sport and what causes this and where this comes from. These can help to explain best reasons as to why people and sports performers may become aggressive.
So, knowing all this, is there reason for coaches to understand their players and associated aggression factors, and could this benefit performance in any way?
Yes, there is beneficial reasons for coaches to understand their players' associated aggression factors that could lead to increase in performance. This is due to the fact that if a coach is aware of these particular things and factors that may cause their players to become aggressive, they could possibly prevent this from occurring and overall see fewer punishments given to the team because of this. There are many factors that can cause players to become aggressive while taking part in sport. Some of these consist of events with aggressive meaning or rivalry, others being aggressive and high levels of arousal or anger. These are just some of the factors that can cause a player to become aggressive while performing in sport. Therefore, if a coach is aware of these particular factors, they could help to reduce this unnecessary aggression and therefore reduce the amount of cautions given to their team. For example, if a coach was aware that a player may become aggressive due to the opposing team becoming aggressive, they could possibly reinforce the player when performing assertively but not aggressive tackles, and therefore making the player want to continue performing in this way, therefore preventing this aggression and unnecessary punishment such as red cards or penalties.